So, y'all, today our Black History Month series continues with Frederick Douglass. And I mentioned him in the other video, but listen, I love Frederick Douglass. He's considered to be the father of the civil rights movement. He was born in slavery, y'all, on the eastern shore of Maryland. His slave owner sent him to Baltimore, so he was still a slave there. And that's when he started plotting his escape after this huge thing happened in his life. You should Google it. But anyway, so then, in terms of his escape, how he escaped though was he borrowed a friend's seaman's papers. So at that time, you had to carry around papers if you were black to show that you were free. And so he borrowed his friend's papers. The papers described somebody who didn't really look like him. Y'all was darker than him, all types of things. And he had a seaman's hat. So basically, like sailor stuff. So this conductor, when he looked at his papers, saw the seal at the top and just didn't even pay attention. And this man escaped. I'm sure there's some other juicy details in terms of how, like, tough that was to escape. But he knew the horrors of slavery. And when he escaped farther north, he sent for this woman he was in love with, who was a free black woman, and they got married. They had kids. They raised a family. He started pushing for the abolition of slavery, which is the abolishing slavery, taking that joint down, because he knew how horrible it was, right? So he's fighting for all of that, but at the same time, y'all, he's still not free. So he, was looking at moving overseas because he had written this book called The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. It was published in 1845. Definitely check it out because he shares his real story about his life and he wrote it himself. So this autobiography is very, very interesting. But anywho, he did leave his family for a little bit and fled to Europe because he was really scared about being captured by his slave owners, because by law, he was still technically their slave. So first he made sure that all of the money from his book sales would go directly to his wife. Then he spent some time overseas while he was afraid. But some of his friends actually, and some of his English friends, raised money to literally pay for him to be free. That's how he got free, y'all. So it's very interesting. So then he started this publication called The North Star. He later renamed it Frederick Douglass's Paper. So at that time, he was also pushing for women's rights. I was like, look, you better go ahead, Fred. He was pushing for women's rights and especially making sure that other people could be free as well. So his house in Rochester was actually a stop or a station on the Underground Railroad. So I thought that all of that was very interesting because he really was taking a risk to do all of those things. So then he even started campaigning for Abraham Lincoln, who was a Republican. So back in the day, apparently, according to history, the way that Republicans and Democrats now have their platforms, it was a little different earlier on in American history, in the United States history, I should say. But anyway, he was campaigning for Abraham Lincoln because Lincoln was the only candidate at that time who was opposed to the spread of slavery. Now, let's be clear, Frederick Douglass didn't agree with Lincoln on everything. That was something they could agree on, and so he was, pushing for Lincoln. But you'll have to read more about Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, Emancipation Proclamation, because I want to really talk about Frederick Douglass more. So then Frederick Douglass's wife died, and interestingly, about 10 years before he passed away, he married a white woman, y'all. His family was hot about it. But he was like, listen, we have the same values, and it's okay. He said, my first, look, in this book, it says that he said his first wife was black, like his mother, and his second wife was white, like his father. Because, fun fact, Frederick Douglass was biracial. So, not biracial, like, in terms of, like, how you would think in terms of, oh, like his mom and daddy fell in love. Frederick Douglass's father could have been his original slave owner, Captain Anthony, but Frederick Douglass himself was never sure. But anyway, he fought for justice until the end of his life. Stay tuned for the